You know, there are these certain parts of the internet where it seems like people are just constantly offended about video games. They're just so fixated on the stuff that makes them the most angry that they write article after article about it, or send hundreds of tweets. And to me, I'll be honest, I try and avoid this stuff because, well, honestly, video games are just fun. I like being able to see cool stories, great adventures, go online, and just get my butt kicked by players that are much better than me. That is the point of gaming. But this week, many of you have actually been sending me a bunch of different clips and stuff about people who are very, very offended by the Final Fantasy VII Remake. What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and I wanted to actually check this stuff out today because to me, I feel like the Final Fantasy VII Remake looks epic. I mean, it looks like a game that is very, very different than the original source material, but simultaneously could shockingly be an upgrade to the best game ever made. Now, I just want to say right up front, this is a very small minority. I'm sure that for the most part, 99% of the population is just as in love with this game as I am, but these people, it's interesting just to see what's actually ticking them off. Now, the first one here is very strange. Now, throughout the trailer that we got last week, it was basically a grand re-reveal where Sony came out and said, okay, this is how the game looks now. Obviously, it's been quite a bit since we've seen it, so they gave us a bigger look at the gameplay, more checkout of the art and stuff, and also let us see three separate characters, which is Aerith, also known as Aeris here in America, Barret, and Cloud. Now, all three of these characters are great, and I think that the changes they've made to their character models are an interesting, if not just a genius choice. But some people are very, very offended by them. Let's begin by taking a look at Aeris. Now, this person probably, in my opinion, has the biggest character change. It seems like they managed to rework a lot of stuff about her general design and a lot of her facial features. In general, it seems like they've actually elongated her face ever so slightly and actually shrunk certain aspects of her, and I think that this was a smart choice. Now, a lot of times in video games, a lot of people go for the anime aesthetic, which is slightly bigger than human eyes. That way they're more expressive. It's basically a way of making it where when someone's sad or when someone's happy, a lot of times we smile or frown and stuff with our faces up here. So putting those as bigger features makes us easier to see those micro expressions in video games. Well, I think that they tweaked her just to try and make her look slightly closer to human and a little bit less anime in general. Well, what's weird is that people in Japan right now seem to be very, very angry, but not just because they changed some of the size of her eyes and the size of her mouth, but actually because they think that Aeris looks too old. This is real. I'm so shocked that I'm even saying this. Now, keep in mind, Aeris, during the events of Final Fantasy VII, is 22. She is not an old woman. She doesn't need a cane. She's actually a decade younger than I am, and still, I would say that she's somebody who looks pretty mature. But apparently, there's a weird thing in Japanese culture where apparently looking super, super young is considered beautiful. So even though she's only 22, they're acting like she looks like she's 50, and they're actually photoshopping her to look like she's closer to 16 instead of 22. Now, to me, this is not only a needless change, but something that's just so peculiar because I feel like you're trying to fix something that not at all is broke. The new character model is great, so trying to revert it is such an odd choice. And I actually feel the same way about what people are saying about Barret. Now, this is actually where the most complaints are coming from, but a lot of people have several different issues with Barret in general. The biggest one being with his voice. So many people don't know this, but technically, there have actually been some mistranslations as to the original text in Final Fantasy VII. Barret is supposed to seem old and mature, but in the English version of the game, he seems almost flippant. He's like an ultra manly man. When situations are getting bad, instead of actually sitting there and being like, what am I going to do? Barret is the type of guy to be like, we gotta keep fighting! We gotta charge forward! We gotta win! Well, what's interesting is seeing this dichotomy, it seems like what they've decided to do in the English version of the Final Fantasy VII Remake is keep the original translation that we had in English, which is basically having Barret be super hardcore and yell out in the gruffest voice possible of a, "We gotta fight, yeah!" Now, to me, this is not an issue, but there are actually a lot of articles that have been written about how his voice sounds, that he's too much of a macho man. Now, I'll just say that personally, I have no issues with this. If the designers decide to switch it, even then, I don't think I'd have a problem with it. I just think that it's interesting that a lot of people seem very offended by how his voice comes off as being such like a gruff, harsh person when the rest of the people actually sound much softer and much more open to ideas. He's the one character that seems almost brutish in his approach, and I think that's interesting. I've also noticed a lot of people a little bit mad that they've actually made Barret much more human looking. Because remember, in the original game, the dude looked like this. It was like an action figure. I mean, he was just so freaking big, it was like a robot decided to eat another robot. It was not super great looking, but at the time, it seemed fine. I mean, we just saw it back in frickin' 1997 graphics and went, okay, whatever, that's cool. But now, people are actually seeming a little bit annoyed about how they've made his features much softer, they've rounded out a lot of his details, and made him, in my opinion, almost completely lifelike. He looks just like a normal person now, which does definitely change his aesthetic. In general, I will admit that the people who are mad about this, I get it. I don't agree with it, but I do think that there is something to say about the fact that he has been so radically overhauled. I mean, even his clothes don't even quite look the same just because it is such a big departure. Although personally, I am thankful that he kept those ridiculous glasses, because to me, that's part of the iconic Barret look. Now the last one, it's the thing that the least people are complaining about, but to me, is still some of the weirdest stuff in general. So obviously the main character of Final Fantasy VII is Cloud Strife, and in the original art of the original game, he looked like this. Kind of a younger man, but also simultaneously somebody who seemed to have some strength. I mean, after all, this isn't a spoiler or anything, he had basically special scientific stuff done to him. The Mako reactors, all that stuff was basically made to make the strongest soldiers even stronger. The programmed soldier that he was a part of even was basically based around this. The idea that they could make super soldiers out of humans as long as they were willing and already pretty trained. This idea is great, but some people seem to have a little bit of an issue with how in Cloud's newest form, the way he looks in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, he definitely seems to have lost a lot of weight. He's much thinner and has much less arm mass in general, even compared to earlier trailers of it. It seems like what they're trying to do is make him have a very youthful and very I guess I would say a desperate look to him. I mean, in general, I think that's part of the appeal of Final Fantasy VII is that each one of these people is having their own character arc. Each person is trying to learn and grow and evolve and figure out their past mistakes. And I think that they're actually leaning into this imagery more with Cloud himself. Since we're supposed to project ourselves into his shoes and relate the most with his story, I think that they're trying to give him a slightly hungrier look. Now, this is just obviously just personal speculation on my part, and there's not really any confirmation of this, but right now it is just an early guess on my part. I just want to say that I think that all the changes we've seen in this remake thus far are very good. There's nothing in here that completely sticks in my mind as being crazy, but that's part of the reason I find this stuff so fascinating. Even the people who are offended by this, I'm actually excited that they're talking about it. I see a lot of these articles where people are mad about the trailer or whatever. I find it interesting that a lot of them start with, I've never played Final Fantasy VII, and that's why I'm excited for the remake. I think that's good. I think a lot of people trying to dissect this art and analyze it from different directions or less skilled directions is a good thing for art in general, even if these people happen to be, in my opinion, very wrong. But what do you think? Have you actually watched the trailer a couple times like I have? And what do you think of the, well, rather drastic changes to it in general? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. And yes, some of this stuff is about Kotaku articles. Not all of it, but some of it. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.